and we missed a little. So while we're waiting for the next minute or two, go do introductions. All right. So I'm just letting somebody else in. So we'll start with people on Zoom. Trish, you want to just introduce yourself?
Hi, Chris
Yep.
Higgins. Boothbay Harbor Sewer District.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris. Go ahead, Trish.
Yeah, Trish Warren, Boothbay Harbor Selectman and Boothbay Harbor citizen too.
Great, thank you. And Philip? Yeah, he's frozen. There you are.
Is the community benefits thing?
Yeah.
Great.
Philip, you want to do a brief intro?
Sure. Philip Conkling, New England Aquaventus Stakeholder Outreach.
Great, thank you. And David Merrill.
Bayville resident.
Okay, great, thank you. And around the table.
Allison Sroy, East Boothbay resident. Allison Evans, Boothbay Harbor resident.
Good evening, David Witt, Bingo Labs.
Okay, and I'm Nell Tharp, East Boothbay resident. Okay, so we have a brief agenda, which unfortunately I printed and didn't remember to bring. So we're hoping to get the update from Rob as the first thing on the agenda, but since he's not here, we'll go to the next thing, which I believe is DOT. Okay. And I'm going to pull up and share a couple pictures. Let's see. Let's do this one. I think it's the right one. So what is being shared is a map that shows where the DOT has right of way. So those blue lines are DOT right of way. And he said basically the utilities run in the DOT right of way. But there's a couple of gaps. So there's a gap right here on Route 96.
Can you turn your screen?
Yeah. Thank you. It's hard for me to.
It's okay.
So there's a gap right here. And I think that's the only gap. Looks like there's a little gap before Bigelow. So we'll have to clarify that if we decide that this is the item that we go forward with. That being said, we had a good conversation. I spoke with, David Allen at DOT and talked about all the things that we were potentially considering. And he said if there's crosswalks, they have to comply with the DOT crosswalk policy and be ADA accessible. And we did actually look at locations for potential crosswalks. One being Route 96 near the East Boothbay General Store. And there was the potential for a crosswalk from the east side of 96 crossing to the west side at Murray Hill Road, right at the junction, but the southern junction, so right where the road sign is. Not, you can't have a crosswalk that goes to a parking lot, so it couldn't be on the East Boothbay General Store side. And there would have to be a little bit of sidewalk put in there, like 10 feet of it, just enough to make a safe landing for somebody who was in a wheelchair. But he said that was doable. He said that near the post office, it is unlikely that a crosswalk could go in because of the parking areas for the post office, that it would be in conflict with those and people's driveways on the other side, and that would not likely work. that one could potentially occur closer to the Lobsterman's Wharf driveway where there is existing sidewalk going over to the little green space next to the mill run. I'm not sure how much value that would be, other than people do cross to go look at the water, but not a high priority. The post office was the higher priority. And the other place that Pauline had talked about previously with wanting to take kids from Sea and Science and other people who want to stop there is up by the land trust property across from Anderson Street. And a crosswalk is possible there because it could go from the sidewalk over to the land trust property directly and not necessarily into their driveway or parking area. So crosswalks were a possibility. He also gave potential price information for just basic crosswalks, not for any of the other pieces. So about $20,000 for the whole crosswalk, sidewalk, all the stuff involved with it. And adding a pedestrian activated beacon like we have at in Boothbay by the Common was about another $10,000, but he did say that they had given those to some towns, that they did have some funding. We did talk about that a little bit, and he gave me some additional contacts, which I've not reached out to because I don't think we should go there unless we have a decision. So he did also share an interesting idea. He said that the road in the village was so narrow that there was not adequate space in the right of way to put a bicycle lane. And that it was possible to do shared roadway signage, which would allow bicyclists the same right of way as cars. And that cars would simply have to follow the speed of the bicyclist, and that would be legal. So they would be in the road, and they could be in the middle of the lane. So that was an important information that I had never heard of. He said in terms of speed mitigation, he showed a number of examples of islands with trees. He did not show any movable or removable islands. He did mention them, but didn't feel like they were the optimum. He said that if we put in something like speed humps, that they use them in, and he gave several examples in streets so we could go look at them if we wanted to. He said they need to go in a series, so that they would start at the beginning of the village, perhaps by the post office, perhaps by the general store, and perhaps somewhere close to Bigelow. And what the net effect of those would be was that everyone knows that they're there, so they don't speed up because they know one is coming. He said isolated speed humps are of very little value. And that putting the crosswalks on the speed humps can have a benefit because it makes it easier to make them ADA compliant because you have less of a grade change. So you don't need to ramp from one to the other, and that plowing should not be a problem if they were properly constructed. So that was all interesting. He did show, and I will stop sharing. Sorry, I forgot I was doing that. He did show an example, which I got a screenshot of, which is in Augusta. So this shows that it has the lines leading up to it to cue people that there's a speed hump. It has the crosswalk in it, and also it has parking cut out over on the side. So that just, it was an example that, so we could all see something that was like what we were talking about.
I ask these the wider deals, not
Yeah.
the little ones.
Right, they're a table, not a bump.
Yep.
Yep.
Not to go airborne on.
Right. Although it will give you a heck of a surprise if you're
Yeah.
going too fast. So, so that was a big piece of it. And then, we did talk about process. And, he said that, you know, obviously, once there's a decision made, we have to go to the town. And then we would have to do, public hearings if there were things that had to go to DOT. So some things have to go to DOT, some things do not. They said that DOT could, the towns could ask for the crosswalks, and DOT could just put those in. Those did not require a public hearing. The speed tables, because of what happened last time, absolutely would have to go to a public hearing and would have some kind of public process. Not sure what that would be. Put everybody up so you can see everybody. So he did ask, I asked what the expenses are, you know, how do you plan this, the plan, the design? There was a group that was working on the sidewalks going from the Y to Clifford Park. And part of that work has been done, part of it has not been done. So not sure why that hasn't been done, if it's a funding issue. I don't know if you know more about it, Trish.
Sorry, it's being done in phases. They have completed the one phase, and there's a second phase that goes in, and that should connect us up to the third phase, which is the part that's in Boothbay.
Okay,
So it's being done in stages.
got it. Okay. And so reaching out to the people who have helped coordinate that could help with picking an engineer if this was the choice, and getting estimates and all of that stuff. But again, it's, you know, and David had some things which is like, okay, you know, find out if you liked working with the engineers that were doing the work going up to Clifford Park. And if so, then you have an engineer. If not, then obviously you want to find a new engineer. And then there's a thing called the Village Partnership with, I believe it's with DOT, and they are providing funding, and it's competitive. But depending on the community and how the community rates, it could be 50-50, so that be matched funding to help put these things in. So that, and then he said there's also private funding. So you can do fundraising, or, I mean, NEAV would be considered private funding. So, you know, whether there was a gap that had to be filled and there was fundraising to fill the difference. So that would be a question once we knew what the numbers were. I did ask about rumble strips since we had spoken about them, and one of the people who plows had said that they were easier for plowing. And he said that they are not a great option for a neighborhood, that they are loud. And you can hear it, especially near the water, it will travel and they will be very disruptive. So I thought that was important information. He also suggested a small radar speed sign that's not permanently mounted, that could be moved around so it flashes. Here's what the speed limit is, here's your speed, and it flashes faster the faster you're going. And then when you get to the speed limit, it just holds steady. And he said those can be useful on a temporary basis, so that might be an adjunct for seasonal. He said they had been giving those away as well. We'll let Pauline in. Hey, Pauline.
Hi, how are you? Sorry I'm late.
It's okay. We're just talking about DOT and the potential options after discussion with DOT. He did show a number of islands to slow traffic and said that that might be useful by the post office. It's a little bit of a challenge because of the turn right there. they'd have to do an assessment, but he did show several roads that had islands. That were roads where people wanted to go 40 or 50, and with the islands, it just narrowed the road just enough. And one of the examples that he gave was in Boothbay by the common going out towards the dump road, how that slows traffic and gives a clear sign that you're coming into a congested area. The other thing that he recommended, I think I've got almost everything, was to add some visual that says you're coming into a village. So whether it's a sign or whether it's planters or whether it's a island or whatever it is, so that it's apparent to people that they're coming into a village and that they should reduce their speed. So those were all the things that he said, that, you know, you want to make it obvious that you should drive slow and that the village was welcome to pedestrians. So trying to make it a pedestrian friendly neighborhood or destination if we're looking for tourist dollars. So anybody have questions? I don't know if I can answer them, but we can always get back to him.
Have you thought about a rumble strip? Like when you come to the turnpike and you're coming to the gate, the toll gates, you know, they have that strip that really slows you down because you're realizing.
So he did not recommend those because they're very loud.
Oh.
And the sound carries. He instead
Oh,
recommended 6-inch high speed tables
Okay,
in a series, so nobody could get up speed between them.
okay.
So other thoughts? Yes.
Just a comment. So with the pedestrian friendly part of it, I think we want to avoid it just being like a bottleneck too.
Yeah.
Because like Wisconsin, for example, like probably is the extreme case where just traffic's backed up forever. So studying like, you know, what the effect of traffic would be in throughput might be useful. I don't know if there's ever a heavy time frame in the summertime where they would get jammed up, but useful to know.
Yeah,
If there are islands, if people slow down enough, right? Islands in the middle, I don't know how you do that. The road's so narrow now, but I'm sure they can figure that out. But if people do start slowing down and we put these things in, like you said, will that create some sort of bottleneck that?
well, I mean, I think if people slow down,
Traffic.
Wasn't Matt concerned about it becoming like an island becoming an obstacle that the kids would hit? So,
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, which is, you know, kind of the point, but it's also, you
But-
know, late
so-
night accident.
Right,
bad
so an
behavior
island, the
issue.
way it was described is, you know, it's like grass. So it's not built up. It's not like Jersey barriers
Okay.
where if you hit it, you
So a
would
curve
bump
would-
over it.
Yeah.
So it would be an island of green.
Oh.
I like
So,
that.
There might be a curb. And again, if with considerations for plowing, it might be a very rounded or a soft curve so that it's not. Trish.
I just have a couple of things, which the islands sound like they'd be pleasant to see, to look at. But my only thing is that if you're putting an island in, how come they can't put the bike path in? I don't get it. Because you're putting in a swath of X
Right.
feet. You have to have so much feet to allow for a bike path. So if they're taking it out of the center, why wouldn't they? You
would
see what I'm saying? Like, are you shifting it that way or that way, or
It's
you have to shift it?
Impervious area. Like,
So yes, it would be on the existing roadway. And actually where I'm thinking is probably
I'm like-
up before you get into the village, right where it changes to 25, where the road is still wider. And
Uh-huh.
that slow people down.
I see.
And then if there's the speed tables, they don't take up roadway. And the biggest issue about the bike path will be where the right of way is. And he showed me some detailed plans, but I don't have access to those. That show how some places the right of way is 60 feet wide, some places it's only 40 feet wide. or, yeah, it's different distances. And sometimes the road meanders in it, so it's not that the road is centered in it, which can be an issue if you're trying to figure out where you could actually put a bike path. If it has to go from side of the road to side of the road, it's not going to be feasible.
We actually just discussed this at our town selectmen meetings Monday about bike paths, and we're actually looking into seeing where we could, because we have the same problem in Boothbay Harbor. There's no shoulders of any kind to put bike paths in. So we're trying to see if there's any way we can figure out the shared space or whatnot. We're, like I said, we're going through DOT to figure out the best course of action, because it has become an issue. We'd like to have a bike-friendly community, but it's not designed. I mean, the roads in Maine and a lot of small towns are just basically carriage roads that got paved over. So they're not designed to have that extra usage. But I do have another question. It's regards to those few gaps that are on 96 that you showed in that shared screen.
Yes.
Who owns them? If it's
Yeah,
not
so-
DOT.
I'm not sure. We didn't get into that because he had only booked 30 minutes and we had a lot of questions. And so I can get back to him with that. And it may be that they are able to use like right where the roadway is. I know he said that the sidewalks that are there would not be permitted now. They would not, like the existing sidewalks like by Church Street. There's a number of places where there's basically no green between the sidewalk and the cars. And that would not be allowed at present, but there's no room to go anywhere else. So,
Did he talk about, can they actually, because some of those sidewalks aren't in great shape, are they, or are they?
they've all been
okay?
redone recently, I think.
Yeah, so one of the thoughts I had was, what about in the village doing the bike, the shared bike area within the roadway, which also would slow people down through that area. So it could be on the side of the road, and then once you come in the village, it's shared space with vehicles and bikes, bike path in the middle. So people would have to slow down also as part of that, you know what I mean? That could be used as a way to
Yeah,
not to put people in a situation that are riding bikes that could be dangerous, but you know what I
Right.
mean, that because there is such a small road space there.
it is. And I mean, people are already riding in it. They're just riding
Yeah.
on the road, but it's not designated as a
Right.
shared space. So
Right.
designating it as that gives people the heads up because you've
Right.
got the signage. So, and I hear you, Trish. I see people riding their bikes wrong way down Townsend Avenue. And it is very disconcerting as a driver.
Even
Well,
if
the worst actually is over by Mill Cove.
Mhm.
I live on that side of the harbor, and when they're coming from Southport, which a lot of people do a lot of biking. I don't know how they do it because it's scary, but they come off of Southport and then they head towards downtown in Boothbay Harbor, and there's nothing. There's zero shoulder. There's
Right.
nothing but a guardrail and the ocean. So
Yeah.
they come flying around there, and that's where I think I would love to see on our behalf to get fixed. But because of that issue, that I understand completely, like the issue. But I did learn that DOT said that there was some problems with marking on some of our roads because it's distracting to the drivers. So, and we might have a problem in Boothbay Harbor with that because the road is not wide enough, I guess, to put the painting on the road itself. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, like the painting that's on the right-hand side.
No, I'm talking about like there's these some communities are doing them now. They look like it looks like a little person and riding a bicycle. Okay.
Oh,
And they
okay, got it.
and they spray paint them on the road.
Yep.
Yeah, because I asked about that, and they said that some of our roads are too small to be able to have those, I guess, because they can be distracting.
Mhm.
So I don't know, but
Okay. Yeah, everything is complicated. Everything's complicated. Philip, have you heard anything from Rob?
Kaler?
No, I'm
Oh.
Philip, just,
Oh, sorry.
Hi, I have heard from Rob that basically they are in, just incredibly up against deadlines for permit applications. And I told him that this meeting was looking for guidance from him either at this meeting ideally or no later than the next 2-hour meeting on the 29th as
Uh-huh.
to what what NIAV's commitment to give more guidance on that, because
Right.
it's too
Nebulous.
it's too broad for them to be able to complete their work.
okay, and so he's not gonna make it this evening, just want to be clear.
It appears that he is not here.
Okay. Okay,
Are we looking for a number?
yes, we were told that we would have a number.
No,
this
what's,
evening.
what's our number, I guess? Are we
Uh,
looking for,
We don't have a project selected yet, so we have a range of projects, and we're kind of gathering information about them, trying to determine feasibility. And so, and they have not given us a ballpark number. So,
is there a favorite? Is there a number one project?
That's what our survey is gonna be.
yeah, it's moved around
Yeah,
as we gather more information, and you go, oh, this one seems more feasible than this one.
Yep.
So, and there may be components of more than one.
yeah, there's like 5 categories that we've identified. And then.
Yeah.
we'll
So
talk about
we'll
that.
talk about that in a minute. So any other things about DOT? I can get back in touch. I said I would after we meet if we had any questions. So if anybody has any other questions, thanks for your info about what's happening in the harbor, Trish.
And like I said, I mean, I would really be curious as to where those gaps are and who owns those.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if you're doing some kind of project, you're gonna have to probably ask for some kind of, acceptance of doing anything, even though there is maybe existing something there, but there might be something you have to look into because those might have been done years ago. I don't know.
Yeah. And, he said that the utility right of way pretty much runs along the DOT right of way. But again, that pretty much leaves a gap that, we should find out more information about that. So. All right, anything else? Going once, going twice?
Now, I was just thinking, when you're talking about being through East Boothbay Village, I mean, that is such a narrow spot. Where you leave the post office and you're heading back up the hill towards the store. I mean, that sidewalk is super dangerous.
Poor signal.
Yep,
There she comes.
it's got that. Like, mic drop.
Lost you for-
Yeah, we still can't hear you, Pauline.
Can you hear me?
We can if you
Huh,
leave your
Can't hear me at
camera.
all. That's weird.
Yep, we can hear you.
I guess that was my only question was, how do you see a bike path going up there? Or,
So-
I already now it's the craziest thing when people are on bikes on that stretch of road is really, really dangerous. People fly over that hill by the church.
So what he said was that we could designate the road as shared use and there would be signage so that the bicycles had the same right of way as the cars.
Okay.
All right. All right, so next on our agenda is the matrix.
So just to jump right in, I worked on it, I think 2 days ago, just to sort of clean it up a little bit. And I had while I was doing that, I had some questions for the group. One was, do we need to spend a whole lot of time right now on the details? Meaning for each of the categories that we have, should we just concentrate on a really good description and maybe not all the details? Because that then could go out in the postcard and into the survey. And then that's really when the choice is going to be made by the community, what they want to look into. And then we can get into really filling in the details on the matrix. So I'm thinking, so I started to, so this is the tab you're on right now is sort of the overview.
Yeah, it stopped sharing, so hang on, let me get it back up for everybody.
And just quickly to go over the topics, the 5.
Come on, share. All right, let me get these guys over here.
Okay,
Okay.
so, oh, and I also froze the columns and the rows so that you
Yep.
can.
So you can
Scroll
scroll back and
down.
forth, okay.
So the first column is the sewer expansion. And if you go to the next tab over, I'm just gonna, that's where I kind of did a little bit more of my own creation there. I just, oh, did it save? Yeah, it did. Okay, good. So the first column is the kind of the description with all the details that we talked about sort of in that first B2 column. And then if you scroll down a little bit, I don't know if it saved everything. Actually, it didn't save.
Excuse me?
Shoot.
Yeah, speak up.
I'm sorry, but in Zoom land don't see anything,
Oh,
or
you're
at
not,
least I don't. I
you're not-
see me 2 different times.
you
When you
sh-
move the screen, the Zoom screen, it like covered up.
Okay,
It was
Share
weird.
The actual document.
I was sharing the document,
Yeah, it wasn't coming through, at least on my end. I don't know about it. Hang on a second.
and now it's paused it. I've never had it pause it before.
So
It looks like it's trying to share, but it's black.
Yeah, it's trying to share and it's just having resume share. Let's try that. Resume share. Go, damn it. Excuse me. All right. Well, this is a PIA. I'm sorry about that. It does not like what I'm doing. And it won't give me, it doesn't have a stop share button now. I love technology.
Okay, once do you want to go back to the first tab and I'll just keep talking and then if we can.
I'm
Stop
just trying,
recording.
no, that's the recording. I just want to see if we can, there it is, stop share. Now I can stop share. Okay, stop sharing. Sorry about the technical challenges. I appreciate that everybody gets it. Try to share the screen again. There's the document. See if it'll share. Did it share that time? No. Okay, I'll try one more time in a different way, and otherwise we'll just do it without it, but that puts you at a very big disadvantage. I'm gonna just do desktop too and see if that will work.
Oh, we have something.
Yay!
Okay, so scroll up, I guess we're on the second tab. It didn't actually save the final product that I had put together, but it doesn't matter. So the first tab has the 5 categories right on top. If you go back to that, actually, let's go back because they weren't seeing what we were talking about.
Oh, let's just use the first page. So it's,
Yeah, that sounds good. So those are the 5 categories for those who are sort of new. Sewer expansion, the road and traffic improvements, the electric utility improvements, which would be just burying lines. I think we said that. The fixed electric utility contract, which we need more.
I got
info
more
about.
information about that.
Yeah, and then year-round public water to East Boothbay. And then there's details there. So this didn't save the version, everything that I did to it. So that's too bad. I don't know why that is, but I'll go back to my version, see if I can do it. But I think after I kind of played with this a little bit, I'm thinking just because of time and trying to get stuff out, we've done a lot of detail, and if we can figure out a really good comprehensive description of what we want to do,
Right.
maybe that's what we kind of finalize to move forward with the survey. And then once we have the top priority for the community or two, then we dive into all the stuff we've started
To talk about.
talk about.
But we had to talk about it to figure it
Yeah.
out. So the one thing that's not on here is something for the schools.
Yes,
So that was a request early
Okay.
on.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna put
I took that off
placeholder.
because I wasn't sure how
it would depend on what,
okay. So
What-
who would be described, who has brought that up and what's the idea? Because we need a description for it.
there
It
is.
was, I'm
ahead.
sorry, it was me that brought it up. And I'm trying to get Robert Taylor, who's the superintendent, to come and speak
Okay.
in regards to it. So if you put it up there, it would just be a place card holder right now.
Right.
And so probably timing wise, we probably need him at the next meeting so that we can finalize the descriptions if that's what we want to do
I can't
I
type
can get a hold of him.
by the big meeting, the last meeting, because I think we need to finalize what we want to put out in the survey by the last,
by next
by
meeting.
next, but the next, yeah, is the next meeting the 2-hour meeting?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
time is fine.
right. So he has to be at the next meeting, I would say. And
Okay.
then I think we just, okay, so if you go to the row column A, if you want to scroll down or zoom out a bit, maybe to see all the different categories.
I'm just gonna scroll down because I don't
Okay.
know if people are looking at it on their phone or what.
Okay, yep. So the other questions I had was short-term impacts and long-term impacts. I'm not sure what that we were trying to get at there, and maybe. So one of the things I was thinking is that we could simplify this, and then, so that people could take a quick look at the matrix with the things we really want them to know, like number of people affected, if municipal or state entities need to be involved, if shared funding, yay or nay, the cost.
Yep,
So
so,
finalizing that column so that they can take a quick look at that, see it, and then they can just click or look at the different spreadsheet with the bigger project description. And that's what all we really need right now to
Yeah.
move things. Does that make sense to
yeah, and
everyone?
most people aren't gonna want
Okay.
that level of detail, in my
Exactly.
opinion. They're gonna
No.
wanna know what it is.
So I think we need to know that, like, what do people want to know and so what do we need on that first row? What do people need to know? Let's finalize what those elements
Okay.
are. Because I think description,
We definitely need a description and
one sentence description,
it could be one or it could be two. I'd say up to
Okay.
3 sentences.
Okay.
We'll put a limit on it.
I know that Niev wants us to do this as a public safety and health justification, but do we need that in that piece? Do we need that row? That could be in the description.
Or it could be that we keep that information for NIAV and the community doesn't care.
I would say
Not
strike
that they
it.
don't care about
Yeah.
it, but so we don't want to lose it,
Mhm. I agree.
but yeah, I don't
Everyone
think,
agree on that? I do.
I don't think the public has a strong interest, and if they do, they can ask and we'll provide it.
Or it could be part of the bigger description of that
Yeah.
in each thing.
So just about advocate, stuff like the brownouts, for example, like I've heard people talk about these things. I mean, not so much
Speak up.
so for example, some of the things in here I think are important, like I've heard the electric utility improvements. Brownouts do happen down in East Boothbay, that is an issue. Would the utility improvement actually solve that? I mean, so that there's some good information in that row that I think would be useful for information for a voter.
And we haven't yet been able to find a CMP contact to be able to answer some of those questions.
Sure, yep.
Okay,
Yeah, so I think I think what you're trying to say is that would be helpful in the description.
Yeah,
of
just-
Under
just
that
mention
thing, so, right.
Briefly,
okay.
yep, yep.
Yep.
So benefit to the community is really what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, yeah, all of it,
So
right.
there's a description, but how does this item benefit the community?
So, I'm sorry, did you say you needed a connection to CMP?
Yes,
I can get a hold of somebody.
that would be fabulous, Trish. You are a godsend.
And
No problem.
I think it needs to be in here. I just don't think it needs to be in this section. I think it needs to be in its own, like under the tab for electric utility improvements, when it talks about the description of what we're talking about, that's where we can say it there instead of in this
Yep,
section.
yep.
Does that make sense to everyone? Okay. Cost estimate, that was another big one I think people are gonna wanna know.
And it's one that we are gonna have a hard time getting information about until there's a concrete plan, and sometimes the
Right.
plan itself has a significant cost to it.
Well,
Could be
here's
a range.
Yeah, here's what I was
Yeah.
gonna suggest, is doing something like less than 500,000, over, greater than 500, like bin it, you know what I
Yeah,
mean, like a
yeah.
range. Do, minimum, maximum, and have like 3 different ranges, over 1 million. I mean, the sewer extension is gonna be millions, really, right? So we could just exceeds this amount of that.
Right,
And then we don't have to get into that. And
Okay.
like I said, when the community chooses, that's when we can get into the nuts and bolts of it.
okay.
Number of residents affected, I think, do you think people want to know that? Like, I don't know how we get at that.
Yeah, so I have a question about, if it's supposed to benefit Boothbay Harbor, and we pick, let's just say, the road stuff that benefits primarily, there's a little bit in Boothbay Harbor, but most of it is gonna be in East Boothbay and would primarily benefit the village and anybody who passes through, okay? And, is that reasonable? So, is there some other, I'm just being devil's advocate here because we may get the question and we need to be prepared to answer it. Is there some other road traffic safety issue that the community would like to see addressed? So, personally, I think that issue where the road is going to be torn up, that's the logical piece of it. And I think most people will see that. So if we said that road and traffic improvements along the route of the cable would make it logical for people. So
Okay.
those little refinements.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, okay, so number of residents affected along the route of the cable, right?
Yeah, and I think they don't, again, I don't think people
It's
are
not gonna
gonna,
change, actually, probably.
I don't think
actually,
people are
for
gonna
any of
care
this.
about it one way or the other.
So we could take that off?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then short and long-term impacts, I mean, that could be based on construction, are we talking, or timeline? Is a timeline a better thing to talk about?
I think it's really about, is there a significant environmental benefit or detriment? So, for example, your point about will it cause traffic backups? That's a short term, definitely a short term, but is it going to be a long-term issue? And if that's the case, then that's what this is about. What is the
I'm
impact?
gonna prioritize, I would say the long term is
When
more
it's
important,
done.
because that's the forever sort of
Yes,
impact.
yes,
Okay.
I'd further just add the sewer expansion, I think also is linked to jobs. I could talk more about that.
Yep.
But essentially that's, I think the long-term impacts are really critical for the business case for why you do each one,
right,
and useful to know.
okay.
Okay, so take out the short-term impacts and just stick with long-term.
I mean,
impacts,
because the
or long-
short-term impacts
implied.
are
Should we say not impacts, but benefit, long-term benefit? I mean, do
outcomes,
outcomes? Okay.
because that could
Just makes it a
include
little
either
different.
one.
Okay,
Um,
okay. So we'll leave, I'll
I
take
think
that,
it's a choice. I mean, you're choosing what do you want?
yeah,
right. And I think community-wise, that's what people are gonna wanna know. And then if you scroll down,
I
oh,
just
you
did.
did. Yeah, and the others were if municipal state entities are required, do we want, that's more for planning, will people care about that?
I think they'll care about it if it comes to the point where there's outside funding. So there has to be match funding, but then it will go to the voters. So I think it can get addressed at that time and doesn't need to be addressed until there's an item selected and we know what the next step of the process is. Because that'll come out in public hearings.
Right, and so that's, I guess, talks to the next one too, which was shared funding required available. I mean, do we want to put that all together in one? Do people want to see that?
Well, I guess
And
that's the reason it would be on there, more would be if you're a voter, right? You're worried about your taxes. going
Right.
up. Potentially you
Right.
See a one costs a lot
right.
of money, one costs a little money. Well, I don't want to vote for a tax increase.
And
So it might be important to know if there's
yeah,
other funding out there or funding dependent, but shared funding is what we look for to do
Right.
sewer, for example. We wouldn't look for any extra funding to do the road improvements.
right.
Right.
So so keep those,
So is it really tax implications is what you're talking about? It's not
So the
whether
voter
it's
wants to know,
shared
I don't
funding
think
or
that's
not,
right.
it's whether there's, how will it affect my taxes in terms of,
right,
yeah, and will it
So-
affect my property value?
Or put a statement up front saying like, none of these are intended to affect your tax base. It's
Right,
either, funding, dependent and some of these will get shared funding.
right,
Be-
and, but we're not looking to the towns to provide any funding.
right. Okay, so just clarify
That for
type-
overall,
Yeah.
no, overall, for the whole thing, that is overarching for the whole thing.
Okay, so that's good to put on the survey or the letter
And the postcard, yes.
Yeah. So we'll qualify, so keep those two categories, don't combine them and just clarify a little bit.
Yeah, I think what we can do is we can keep this as our working document and then just make a
I plan.
separate document that is just
more
very
refined.
cut and dried.
Yeah.
And-
But I think, yeah, I don't wanna take out any of the work we've done, but we can have another V3 version 3 that can go with the,
That's just
Yeah.
for the public.
yeah. but-
And then some of this is all just.
I moved that actually in my
notes.
version. Yeah, this was,
Yeah.
that all went into some of the other stuff that I did.
It
which-
was notes because that's how I think.
Yeah.
I have to, if
Yeah.
I don't type it, it was gonna disappear, so.
This is a working document.
It is absolutely. So, any thoughts about additional thoughts about putting together a matrix that is just for the public to be able to get a broad overview of these, plus the school, which for some reason it's not letting me type on here right now, Trish. We haven't forgotten it. It's just arguing.
It's okay. I mean, at least in my experience, the more transparency, the better. So if you can give the folks as much information from start to finish, they'll be happy about it. So,
So if we're giving them a brief overview for decision purposes, but they have access to the link for the bigger working document so that they can look at it, and if they have questions, they can ask, then there's transparency. So people who don't want the information don't have it, but people who say, well, wait, I want to know what more of what you're thinking or what your process was, could see the full. I have no problem with that. Does anybody have a problem with that? My experience is most people don't want to see it, but there's going to be those who say, hey, I want to understand this, and they'll go back to it.
there are
So-
plenty of Monday morning quarterbacks, trust me.
Yep. Yes. All right. And Pauline, I know before the summer took off and you got so busy, you had been working on the text for the postcards.
Yes,
So do you have draft language?
I don't. I think Dana and Allison and I were just going around and around on email. So we need to just regroup and
Okay.
get back to it. So if
So
I
if,
will definitely get an email out to them.
if we could have draft language by the next meeting, then we can finalize it at the next meeting.
Okay, so, and that's the 29th?
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
and that's the postcard you're talking about, right?
Yep, that's the postcard. And then the survey questions we'll have to develop, which I think should just be to prioritize.
Yeah.
Here's what's on the list. We've invited people to community meetings. If you have an other, that people can do a write-in, but otherwise, just if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things, we'd have, just rate them 1 to 6. If you need more information, go to this link and keep it just very basic.
Yeah, I think the simpler and the easier and the less time consuming and the least amount of reading that they have to do will get better results.
Yep. And our goal is to be able to invite the register to next week's meeting, probably toward the end of the meeting, so that we can give them an overview, tell them we'll send them a draft of the matrix, and happy to talk about the details of it, so that they can do an article and include on the electronic version the link to the survey. There are people who won't do an electronic survey. So what is our approach for those people? If they get a postcard and they want to respond, we need to have the capability for someone who's still doing, an envelope and a stamp.
How about if you did in the town halls?
Yeah, that's what I thought. Did we talk about that? I thought, like, putting a
I don't
little
remember.
box of like survey forms and then they can just fill it out and leave it.
Okay.
Is
I'm
that,
sure that won't be a problem.
yeah, okay.
Okay, great.
We asked Dan if that was.
And then, Trish, I don't know if you were at the meeting, where, it was the last meeting that Rob was here, where he was very clear that, once a decision is made, the benefit agreement would be made with each of the towns. So we'll need at some point to get the towns to come to agreement that this is the project, and they will both, come to agreement with NEAV.
Okay. I keep our group, our select board abreast on everything that we discuss. So I can shoot over an email and tell them that that's what ultimately is the end game, at least on our part.
Yeah, so that's who the agreements would be. That'd be between NEAV and the 2 towns. And then, of course, depending on what the work is, there may need to be a community group to help shepherd it forward. And I'm going to put out one last thing, which may be a default, not necessarily what any of us are looking to do. But if for some reason everything gets confusing, or the prices are too high, or I don't know, it's not working for whatever reason, the ability to have a designated fund that the money goes into so that the project can move forward at its own pace, but NEAV can fulfill their obligation without getting it drawn out. Because obviously that's not in anybody's best interest. And we won't go there unless we have to, but for you, Trish, I talked to Dan about that today. Just want to make sure that it's on the radar, that that's a default if needed. And we have
So,
talked about it.
Just for clarification, you're saying that if we haven't got all ducks in the row by the time they need to move along with their project, it will be put into an account for a later date. Does that make
Correct.
sense? Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So, if they said, well, if it weren't, let's say it's not the road, it's electric utility improvements, and CMP says, yes, but we can't put this on our capital plan until 2027. Then we've got a placeholder and we have X amount of dollars to go towards it, and you can look for additional funding if needed and work with CMP, but you've got that money set aside. Okay. I mean,
Understood.
that'll depend what the community says.
Of course.
David, did you have a comment? Okay. So any other comments, questions, points to raise in the last 4 minutes?
So So I am willing to work with you now on finalizing the bigger description of each of the
A
categories.
simple matrix.
Yeah.
A simple matrix.
Simplifying things so that we'll have a good, almost final draft when we meet.
That sounds good.
Okay.
That sounds good.
And I'll have the almost final draft on postcard.
And you'll have the almost final draft of the postcard, and we've already decided what's gonna go on the survey, so I will see if I can draft a
Yep.
draft a survey with,
And we will want the language introducing the survey that talks about this is not gonna impact your taxes. This is kind of the overview of why we're doing this and what we're doing. We need some paragraph or something about.
and I think that should go on the matrix as well.
Yeah.
So if somebody clicks on it, they get the same message. We need to be consistent on all these things.
Yeah.
So. All right, so if anybody has questions or wants to help, reach out to, me or Allison or Allison.
The other thing was we didn't go over the
Pauline?
electric, one of the, the utility
Oh.
contract,
Yeah.
but we can table that. And then also we'll need the school to
Yes.
represent, otherwise we might have to kind of have it be a write-in.
You're muted, Trish.
Sorry. So the 29th, is that correct?
Yep, from 5 to 7. So we're gonna try and just hammer through all of this stuff and have drafts ready to show and edit and finalize.
All right, I will get a hold of Mr. Kaler and have him be there at that meeting.
Okay, great. And if you can pop me that CMP contact, I will reach out to them and see if even if they can't come, if they can have a conversation with me.
Yep. Sounds good.
Okay, sounds wonderful. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't save. I did a lot of work on it, actually.
I've never,
Well, it's gotta be saved on your computer.
Yes.
It didn't save it to the